says that responsibility is so diffused that no one in effect is responsible. So we are trying to create a constitutional convention that could get at those different problems. There are some other groups that are out there. They are putting forth important reform measures that we should probably all support. But I would argue that if they don't go far enough, and then we don't have time to wait. I don't think that the legislature is going to be able to come up with changes anytime soon with past this precedent. The initiative process is limited by a single subject rule. So you only can have one issue in each initiative. And so for the changes that we're talking about, imagine the number of initiatives that you would need. And by the way, an initiative costs $30 to $60 million. Pretty expensive. A constitutional convention is a much more efficient, cost-effective way to get into different changes that we need. The one other thing I'll throw out there for you is who makes these decisions, right? This may be arguably one of the most important things that's happened in California in 130 years. So we're calling on you, okay, citizens of California. We have a hybrid mix. We have 240 people that are randomly selected from the population, 3 per assembly district. Okay, we're not scared of the people. We're trying to celebrate the people and the diversity of California. So we bring them in. But then we need some expertise to get in there as well. And so what we have is in every county, including Alameda County, a panel of 5 local government leaders, 2 supervisors, 2 mayors, and a school board member. And anyone who wants to apply with a couple of exclusions for this process, because we want to protect from cronyism. So lobbyists aren't allowed to go in, and some members of their own staff can't necessarily go in. But anybody, I'm assuming most of the people in this room, could apply to serve that way as well. So if you weren't selected, you could go and apply at the Alameda County Board of Supervisors or wherever they actually hold this hearing. And there are 221 of those kinds of delegates. So when you put those together, you're talking about 240. So 461, excuse me, my math skills went out the window right there. So 461 people assembled, experts, everyday Californians. They have about a year to come up with proposals, and then they bring them forth to us, the voters. That's what we're proposing. We don't think it's a very scary thing. We think it's a very necessary thing. But we are going to oppose, and I would ask if you are interested in supporting or participating, volunteering, whatever you want to do, it's repaircalifornia.org. Adrian and Casey are right here, and they can help out too if you're willing to sign up. And then with that, I thank you very much for the time and the opportunity.
Members of the audience should feel free at this point to approach the microphones that are in front of both aisles with questions for the panelists. And while that happens, are any members of the panel have any additional thoughts they want to share while people get ready?
I just want to know a little bit about the math here. There's 58 counties, so how do you get 221 from 5 per county?
It's not 5 per county. It's what you do is you take the 221 and then you split them by population amongst the counties. So LA County would get
more,
27%.
That was going to be my next question. Great.
Are both mics on at this point? Okay, why don't we start over here?
Hi. Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank all of you for your contributions to this debate, both today and more broadly. I have a general proposition and a couple of small friendly propositions. The general proposition is that underlying what a lot of you have talked about is there's a big difference between California's electorate and population. All the statistics I've seen show that the electorate is a lot whiter, older, wealthier, and more comfortable than the population as a whole. So we keep getting underinvestment in anything for young people, namely education, anything that benefits poor people, and so on. And so, I love the idea of a constitutional convention to break that system, because it's not just that it's a messy system formally, it's that the results are so bad. But what I'm scared of is anything that would replicate that situation. And when I look at Repair California's proposal, which I'm grateful that it's out there, I'm fascinated but terrified by the idea of randomly picking 400 people, and we'd have 240 Sarah Palins up there. It might be very interesting. I'm terrified by the left side too, because I don't know what other counties look like. supervisor who's been elected to another office because they're totally out of touch. Lately, they're totally out of touch with the electorate. One has turned into our mayor here, and based on my watching county supervisors and our mayor, the idea that you're going to get anything other than the usual patronage by having those people appoint 221 delegates, I think is just, that's not going to work. Something different needs to be on this side. I think we want something that won't replicate what we have now, which was populism gone mad, so that people keep overspending and overtaxing themselves. But you also, the last thing you want is a really elitist system, which would just reinforce or worsen the situation where the wealthiest folks in the state get off without paying their fair share, and the rest of us just can't reinvest in what we need to. So, any ideas about that? Thanks.
I'll jump in real quick because I'll just be here for a couple of the questions. I'm just going to touch on one of your points, which I'm glad you raised, because I don't think any of us did, and that is a huge disconnect between the population and the electorate. And I think you summarized that very well. And you know, in addition, or instead of a constitutional convention, getting more civic engagement in the state and having more people vote would be huge. The only one response I have to your point is those polls that Dean Brady put up were registered voters, so why the electorate is more conservative and why they're more affluent, like you're talking about, than the state, there still is a broad cross-section. And you know, this might be sort of a flippant comment, but having seen a lot of focus groups, I've been amazingly impressed by a group of randomly selected residents not responding to a 30-second commercial, but spending several hours grappling with the problem. And not to knock my former colleagues, but I've been somewhat more impressed with that level of discourse than what happens when you get folks who are influenced by special interest contributions. So I'm a little more optimistic about what happens when you bring, you know, randomly selected people, because hopefully you have that split of liberals, conservatives, in the middle of the road.
Right.
Go ahead.
I'll try and be short. If you look at the assembly districts and sort of how they're going to go and what happens when you randomly select from them, you probably are going to get a Sarah Palin, but you're probably also going to get a Ralph Nader, and you're going to get moderates, and you're going to get a whole, it's California, baby, right? I mean, we're going to see all the different stuff that's there, but I don't think we should be scared of that. I mean, I also have watched these kinds of experiences, and
It's the other side I'm scared of.
well, that's why you have more everyday Californians mixed with the different experts. But, you know, perfect is hard to get in anything. The other thing I would just say that why we liked the idea of drawing citizens out through this sort of process is that it's so hard these days to get reform measures passed, because the first question that any person in this room would ask is, who's bringing forth this reform measure? What's their interest in it? And so we like that about having everyday citizens there, is that when the reforms come out from the Constitutional Convention, you can say it was people like you and me. You can see that process will be a transparent process. We think that's a strength.
Why don't we go over here?
This is probably directed to, is it Jonathan Grubb? Jonathan.
Sure, yeah, John.
John Grubb. I'm just getting a little bit familiar with the whole effort to reform California politics. Not that I haven't followed it, but as far as these organizational issues, it's relatively new to me. What I'm concerned about is in getting involved in this, I've come across several organizations, one of which is this one, are yours, and the other one is California Forward, and I'm sure there are others. California Forward has a little bit more limited objective, I think, in terms of only 2 or 3 propositions that are of concern to them. I'm wondering how you see the politics of various organizations coming together as you work toward November of 2010. I'm afraid that you're going to cannibalize or dilute one another's efforts. Is there any effort to merge your objectives, and if so, how, and when, and so on? So, thanks.
And I would invite the panelists to describe in some detail the other reform measures we can expect to be on the ballot in 2010.
I'll do my best on that, and then anybody else that wants to chime in. So there are going to be